Welcome to episode 23 of the Strategic Momentum Podcast. I'm your host, Connie Steele. Recruiting the right talent can be a frustrating process, and for leaders looking for their next opportunity, finding that perfect position isn't so easy either. Our guest today is Dan Yu, the founder of FastBook Advisors. His executive recruiting agency focuses on solving his clients' business needs and goals by translating those needs to delivering the right talent. Dan has a unique perspective on the recruiting process because, as you'll hear, he's seen the struggle from every side. And in this show, Dan discusses the challenges for both employers and job hunters and how both can navigate their way through this process by taking a strategic approach to finding that ideal fit. So glad to have you on the show today, Dan.
Thank you, Connie. It's great to be here.
So let's talk about your career journey. As you know, you've had a really interesting one that certainly didn't start out with you running your own recruiting agency.
No, absolutely not. Going back to my internship days, I was brought into this financial technology firm called Instinet back when I was in college for summer internship with my uncle working in accounting, and I was doing data entry there. But it got me into being introduced to all the different parts of the firm. So I wasn't just in accounting. I spent some time on the trading desk and some time in operations. But eventually I got a full-time job on the trading desk after graduate school. I was there for almost 15 years. And then I left to go to a small firm that wanted me to build their trading desk from scratch. It was a great learning experience for me. I was able to build a whole team. I took care of the furniture, the phones, the technology. I built the sales model, the whole thing.
Wow.
I was there for a year. That firm was a New York Stock Exchange floor firm, but they made a pivot and created a whole new business line. I did see commission compression, meaning commissions were going lower from 5 cents to 4 cents to 3 cents in a year. Commissions were really crushed, and their model was an agency model, so they didn't really have that many services outside of trading. And so I made a pivot to another firm, a research firm called Puglisi, where I was brought on as one of the traders, but I helped rebuild their desk with technology. And I was there for a couple of years, and then I decided I was done with trading because the commissions continued to be compressed. So trying to generate more revenues meant more trading. And at the time, I felt a better move for me was to go back to the technology side. So I joined Citigroup, a division of Citigroup called Lava Trading. I was there for 4 years through the financial crisis. Then went to one of their competitors, a firm called Realtic, which at the time was a Barclay asset. I ran their sales for the Americas for a couple of years, and then I decided that financial technology, as far as trading technology, that was enough for me. And I went to a firm in the data analytics space called Armonta, and I rebuilt their sales model there. That's a great little firm as well. But then after that, I decided to go into executive search and help firms of all sizes, startups all the way to Fortune 50 companies, to rebuild their teams, to build their teams, to attract talent. So I went from selling services in tech to being a client and understanding where technology should go, then back to selling technology. Now I'm taking my understanding of sales process, having owned P&L, understanding the urgency of a hiring manager's goals, and applying that knowledge to their search process.
What made you do the pivot specifically from working on really the client side to being on the side where you're helping companies build out their teams?
I was recruited by the hired guns to join their team to help build out their sales and marketing practice, as well as attack a couple of industries which they saw a lot of growth in: financial services and financial technology. So it seemed like a pretty natural fit. I've known the owners of the Hired Guns for a couple of decades, so we go way back, and they're a great team over there.
And the Hired Guns is a recruiting firm in New York City?
Correct. They are a recruiting firm in New York City.
What trends or important dynamics have you seen with respect to recruiting talent these days?
Obviously, LinkedIn is such a great resource for both the talent side to market themselves, but also for recruiters and hiring managers to source talent and to really connect with the talent side. One of the pitfalls that I've seen from the talent side is people are a little afraid, or maybe there's some inertia there around really filling out their profile. I know a lot of people that have a minimalist profile, just something that has their companies and their job titles. And if they're serious about their career, if they're serious about growing, it's very hard for recruiters and hiring managers to take a look at your profile and say, oh yes, this person is serious about their career, that they're serious about growth. It also kind of demonstrates that maybe the person's not very detail oriented.
Really? That's interesting, because I think for some people, they may not be as comfortable putting all that information out there, because whether it's a time thing, whether it's maybe a concern of feeling too boastful, so it's about just putting, the simple facts, and that based on that, then that may be enough for them to get that discussion with the recruiter. And then really the resume is everything that they would use to facilitate that deeper conversation.
Sure. I'll take the other side of that. There are definitely some people that are out there that are too busy to work on their profile. I really think that if you're serious about your career, that if you really want to talk about career growth and your career goals, I think it's really important to have your LinkedIn profile, which is your online presence. It's your brochure, and have it be optimized to really attacking both the recruiter market as well as the hiring manager market. One of the things that recruiters do use is a keyword search, and if you don't have the right keywords, you won't even get past the recruiter. And then the other side of it is having quantifiable almost stories and accomplishments, so that you can show your impact to that hiring manager that may get your LinkedIn profile forwarded to them from a recruiter.
Any other key trends or dynamics that you're also seeing within the industry that's really impacting the way that people look for jobs, or the way people are trying to find talent for those jobs?
Well, I think a lot of people can attest to applying for jobs electronically, either via email or via LinkedIn or via job board or a career page at a corporation, and feeling lost. So feeling lost, and when you apply online, it could be that black hole where you throw something in and you don't know if you're ever going to get something back out. I always encourage my candidates, even when I'm working with them, to try to warm up that connection. If there's somebody that they may tangentially know within a company that they're targeting, to reach out. I think it's important to have as many touch points as possible. As far as the recruiting side, sourcing talent, when you can see somebody's impact and not just their previous roles, and really understand what their potential is to your organization, but also if they're serious about their presence. If they blog, if they write meaningful articles and demonstrate their subject matter expertise.
As Dan tells us, creating that robust profile on LinkedIn should be everyone's primary focus. And this is the first thing that many hiring managers or recruiters will see about you. And you want to make a good impression. And as Dan mentioned, if you don't even have the right keywords, you won't get the opportunity to make an impression at all. So that's the talent side of things. There are also some big misconceptions on the hiring side too, especially when it comes to hiring managers who only want talent that's just right. So what other myths or misconceptions are there when it comes to employers trying to find, the best people for the positions they have?
Sure. The one of the misconceptions around hiring, and I've seen this recently. Hiring managers sometimes will be like a Goldilocks, so that this one's too hot, this one's too cold, and they're really looking for something that's just right. And that is a pitfall for a hiring manager. I've also seen where as their business changes over time, because they're taking a long time to fill a role, they'll end up adding more things onto a role, and then the job becomes more like a Frankenstein, and it's just and they just keep throwing more and more stuff on, and then it's almost impossible to fill that role. And you as vendor, sometimes it's a little bit difficult to convince a hiring manager to take a step back because I'm outside. But if we have the right partnership and the right rapport with the hiring managers, and that's one of the things that we do require, that we have access to hiring managers. It's really important to keep them honest too, saying, "Hey, listen, you said you wanted to hire somebody by a certain date. Well, it's getting close to that date, and we're still in first round."
Do you feel it's because of your experience having worked again in businesses and building businesses before that you can relate to them, connect to them on what it means to really drive towards those goals and finding the right mix of people that can address them, versus it being you have to find, that the perfect individual that has all the check boxes based on the requirements they've provided?
Well, those situations I've actually lived myself. So I've been through that myself when I've hired in talent. When you've got revenue goals, the clock is ticking. It is much more important to hit your goals because ultimately you're responsible as a hiring manager for not just your goals but your team. If you're the tip of the spear for revenues for your organization, you've got the franchise responsibility. If there's 100 people that work within your firm and you're responsible for revenues, you're responsible for 100 people putting food on the table. That understanding is an appreciation of that responsibility. It's important. If you take a long time to hire talent, that's more time where you're not achieving your own goals. I've also seen where hiring managers wait too long and they'll lose budget. They'll lose the budget for that headcount. And then they're even more behind the gun, behind the eight ball, as far as achieving those goals.
One of the key misconceptions is the timeline, that there's not a clear understanding of really the length of time it takes. So Dan, tell us a little bit more about this timeline or misconceptions around really how long it takes to find the right talent.
Well, one of the toughest things to overcome, it goes back to timing. It really goes back to timing. And the misconception that you need to find somebody perfect. When I engage with a hiring manager, they'll typically say something like, this role requires somebody with 7 to 10 years experience and they cost X. And my question to them typically is, well, what if I can find somebody that can solve 80% of your problem? They have a couple years less experience. Maybe they have 5 years experience instead of 7 to 10. And they cost 80 cents on the dollar, right? 80% of X. But I can present them to you fairly quickly. And then you can start really hitting on your goals. Would you be interested in meeting that person? Conversely, would you be interested in meeting somebody that has a little bit more experience? So maybe 12 to 15 years experience. They come at a premium, but they can actually accomplish all of these other cool things for you. Would you be interested in meeting them in pretty quick fashion? The hiring managers that are really focused on their goals, they'll be open to that suggestion, which is very encouraging because I'm now able to work in a much larger pond. I've opened their lens, which helps my role to support them.
So when we talk about timeline too, when they reach out to you, do they think you can pretty much turn somebody over on a dime?
When a hiring manager comes to me, I will get this quite frequently. I'll say, "So what's your timeline to hire?" And sometimes they'll say, "I would like somebody in yesterday," but that's obviously not realistic. I'll then ask them, "What's a realistic timeline for you to get somebody started in the position?" And if today was June 1st, and they say, "Well, can I get somebody in by end of June?" And if it's a senior position, that's just unrealistic. Because for a bunch of things, if it's a senior person, they'll have to go through multiple rounds. They'll have to resign from their last position. It usually takes a few days to negotiate salary. So this role might take you 2 months minimum to hire somebody or to have somebody start. And that means every minute that goes by, it's another minute that where you're not achieving your goals. And so if somebody starts, let's say August 1st, then working backwards, that means they're going to resign, let's say minimum 2 weeks, July 15th. They're going to have to think about the contract and potentially other offers. That's another week. Getting the offer out to the candidate, that's another week. So we're almost in June already at that point. And that means going through final rounds with candidates usually takes about a week and a half to schedule and get somebody in and have them take some time off to be out of the office. That means the turnaround time for getting first rounds is a week, and sometimes that's hard to do to be able to get a candidate to respond to a recruiter's reach out, and then go through the intake call and have that initial discussion around the role and then the potential fit. So 8 weeks is tight for senior positions.
So really, to me, the takeaway from what you just said is that if you're looking for these senior positions, you really need to map out the time frame in which that individual would come in and start the ground running so they can address your goals. So it's working backwards, saying, if we have this key initiative that needs to be addressed, this person we'd ideally like to have them at this point in time so that they can effectively make that impact. Otherwise, it's a more tactical approach and saying, well, we just need a body in now.
Correct. And hiring managers, they really have to dedicate the time. They really have to dedicate the time to interact with their recruiter, be internal or external. They really have to give feedback, constant feedback. This candidate, I like these 3 things about their profile. And that's on the initial stage. The feedback after round 1, round 2, round 3, that has to happen in almost live fashion. And the hiring managers that really do that well, those things well, they'll get the talent in fast.
As a hiring manager, having unrealistic expectations regarding the kind of person you want and the time it takes to find them will put you more behind the 8 ball as far as achieving your goals. So work backward to define that realistic timeline based on when you need that candidate to make that business impact. And Stan tells us, quickly provide that feedback throughout the talent recruitment process. You'll get the talent you're looking for both easier and faster. Next, we talk to Dan about the challenges leaders may face when they are looking for their next opportunity. So let's look at the other side of the coin, which is when you're working with these leaders who are trying to find their next opportunity. And what are some of the challenges you see they're facing when they're trying to identify what's that next move for them?
One of the typical things that I'll hear from a candidate when I say, "Tell me about your career goals. What would you love to do next?" And they say something that's pretty general, something along the lines like, I'm looking for something that will utilize my skills and experiences. Well, that doesn't tell me anything. What do you want to do? What would you love to do? Where do you see yourself in 5 years? And then let's work backward. Ultimately, they need a strategy. If you don't have a strategy, then the tactics really mean nothing. Applying to jobs online that seem to be aligned with what your goals are, that they're without direction. I have conversations like this quite frequently where there are these senior executives that, or just people in general that don't know where to start. And one thing that I always encourage them is to think strategically. Think about your career like a business. There's a lot of books that are out there that will focus on this. But if you think of your career as a business and that you're the CEO of your own business, you're responsible for everything. You're responsible for the human resources management. You're responsible for the revenues. You're responsible for the marketing, the operations, the community service, and everything that a business would normally have. Once you look at it that way, coupled with who are you responsible to? Are you responsible to, if you have a spouse, children? They're your board of directors. They're your shareholders. And so having that appreciation and that viewpoint really should light a fire in focusing your efforts towards building a strategy and then the subsequent tactics that need to happen. So building your LinkedIn profile so that it's not a minimalist profile is part of the marketing, part of the messaging, is part of about productizing your experiences so that it's attractive to a potential recruiter.
So they're taking a very tactical approach to finding a job. So it's, so here's what it sounds like is that, they're ready to find their next opportunity. So their first default is to just talk to folks, maybe look at the job boards and apply without really identifying what they want to pursue and crafting that positioning, that story on where they feel they're going to be most effective, and then communicating that to you.
And it's hard as someone that has an understanding of a very tangential understanding of where their career has been as a recruiter. If someone comes to me and they say they're looking for a job, well, is it they're looking for a job, or are they looking for the next step, which will then vault them to the role that's the second one down the line? I try to encourage people to think about whatever role that they're looking for today, to have it be the launching off point for the following role. It could be within the same company. Maybe they have a path that they're interested in, or just something within their industry, but a greater role. But without that strategy, it's very hard to then set the path.
Let's talk about some misconceptions or myths or challenges that somebody looking for a job or a leader looking for a job may have, say in the case of them losing their job. What commonly kind of comes up when you interact with them, and that may be a bit limiting to them finding that next opportunity?
Sometimes a candidate will come to me and they'll be really effusive about what a great job they did, but they still lost their job. And unfortunately, the anger or pain really comes out. And it's like dating. Bitter and angry is not sexy. That's one thing that if you've lost your job, or if you're in a job but it's not going well, and you're looking, really just have a positive message. And it's marketing, right? You want people to be able to introduce you. You want hiring managers to hire you. You want recruiters to say, yes, this person is somebody that I can definitely pass on to a hiring manager. And so crafting that message and having the marketing all ready to go at a moment's notice is really key, because you never know who might be able to introduce you. So I mean, the 4 P's of marketing, really, it goes to that. So it's product, price, promotion, and placement. And having an appreciation of the messaging and the positive nature that messaging needs, and rinse, repeat. Keep practicing that message. Never stop looking. When you're in a job, one of the keys is to never stop looking. Continue networking. And there's also the flip side of it. When should I look for a job? So one thing that someone told me when I was very early in my career, and I didn't get it until much later, is once you become indispensable, that's a time to look. Because if you're indispensable, that the company can't live without you, that's actually an opportunity to get promoted, to then potentially hire somebody to come in and do your job, and then maybe time to look outside.
That's great insight. And one key takeaway I have is don't air your dirty laundry. It's kind of the takeaways that I got from that.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Nobody wins when you burn your bridges. Nobody wins.
I love this idea of running your career like a business, and it makes a lot of sense. The CEO of a business is responsible for creating the business strategy and communicating that vision to other people. Leaders looking for their next opportunity need to be on top of all of that, and really everybody should be constantly looking for new opportunities. So plan out your career path and then consider the role you're in today as the launching off point for the next role. So let's talk about the strategies now to help the clients that you have break through this inertia that they may be facing. So let's first talk about the companies that you work with and essentially those hiring managers. What are those recommendations that you provide to them?
This definitely goes back to understanding their problem in a strategic sense, which then will help me as a recruiter deliver that message to the talent side. Having that rapport is really important so that I understand the business problem that they're trying to solve rather than the seat they're trying to fill. So that's one key when a hiring manager is working with any recruiter. Give the recruiter exactly the problem you're trying to solve, because that will then get the recruiter to think about solving the issue, solving the problems, breaking through that opportunity rather than just filling the seat. It all starts from there, and it will frame exactly the process later down the line. Because once you get a slate of candidates that can solve the problems, it's less about filling the seat.
Give me an example of how you've done that. Because it sounds like, once you understand what that problem is, it may be reframing what the need is based on your understanding of that business goal.
One of the challenges around solving business problems is could be tenure. Could be tenure. If someone has maybe 5 years of experience, but you're thinking that maybe they need 10. In this talent market, there's a lot of the younger talent. One of the key things around dealing with the younger candidates, they're really great around gathering skills. So they will have a lot of acronyms and a lot of letters and skills on their LinkedIn and resume. They may not have that much experience as far as years and accomplishments, but they can learn. They can learn, and each company is going to be different anyway. So moving from one firm to the next, they're going to have to relearn processes. They're going to have to relearn systems anyway. So having the basic skills could actually solve the hiring manager's problem a little bit quicker.
So it's almost now looking at it from the perspective of aptitude and potential versus having everything on checking off all the boxes.
Checking off all the boxes is a dangerous thing. If you have 50 boxes and you try to check off 45 to 48 of them, that's the Goldilocks. It's got to be just right. Well, that's not realistic either.
And so getting your hiring managers off this notion of having to have that perfect candidate check off all the boxes really gets shifted when you say, look, what's the right person to address the business goal? Not Correct. What are the right qualifications that you believe will be the right person.
Absolutely, and when I prepare candidates for their interviews, I put them through what I call interview prep boot camp, and it's really a technique around storytelling. The hiring manager at that point has probably reviewed your resume, they've reviewed your LinkedIn profile, but to really understand how you can help their goals be accomplished, how you can solve their problems, push through on their opportunities. It really is a matter of closing that cognitive gap between what they've read and what can they hear from you. Whether it's a phone interview or if it's an in-person interview, being able to tell that story and really demonstrate your aptitude, your capabilities around solving problems. Are you able to have an immediate impact? Are you able to have a strategic impact? Tell those stories. Have you learned from a situation? Are you able to make a pivot after you've learned about a situation that didn't go perfectly? Those are all great stories to tell, and as long as they're aligned with the hiring manager's goals, if you can demonstrate telling those stories, then that's a big feather in your cap in the interview process.
So that also sounds like specific strategies that you've recommended to job hunters or those leaders who are looking for new opportunities, providing that context, that story, that strategic, viewpoint of, what makes them them and what they're looking for.
Absolutely. If you're moving from one company to another, the stories will never align perfectly. They just don't. Conversely, if you're moving from one industry to another, the stories will of course not align. And so you have to demonstrate aptitude. You have to demonstrate that you're capable of being a good, reliable set of hands that can handle problems, that can handle clients, that can hear the ire of a client on the phone and be able to react in a quick, efficient, and customer service oriented manner.
So, what other tips, recommendations, advice do you provide for those leaders who are looking for opportunities, whether it is near term right now or maybe something that or opportunities that they'd be looking for in the future?
This goes back to running your career strategically. If you're running a business, you want to make sure that you have a disaster recovery or a business continuity plan. So have multiple plans. You might even want to have other revenue streams. So you might have a side hustle or a side gig. But really, it's about never stop looking. It's about networking. It's about creating your social presence, being a subject matter expert potentially, and blogging, being on Twitter, and connecting with potential connectors that are out there. So having that network work for you. It's about having this long-term view. One of the things that I like to talk about when I speak to talent is the 50% rule. So half your day in an ideal world is doing your job, and the other half is actually managing your career. I can speak to my own career and how I learned this myself. When I was early in my career, I was go, and I was all about the client. I was handling some really big mutual fund clients as a trader and a salesperson. I was all about the client, and I didn't manage my career at all. I was really good at my job, but I was not very good at managing my career. And when I say that half of your day is doing your job and half of the day is managing your career, the managing your career part of your day really can be networking. It can be going to conferences, but it really is about creating your presence and demonstrating your responsibilities. And it could be sending the right email. It could be sending that victory lap email and congratulating everybody else on your team and not taking any credit for yourself. And being that magnanimous and generous person, not counting points, but really helping them appreciate you. Because in your career, you're going to have a lot of different contexts, but clients, the people that work for you, your peers, your managers, your vendors and competitors. Really, you know, that having that dynamic and that network work for you over the long term. A lot of it is really managing your presence and calling people back in a timely fashion. The fundamentals of business, really, it's so important to be generous and to be kind, especially in networking and helping people and giving back to your community, which then is really that half of your day of managing your career.
So it's making sure that you're mindful of seeing it from a bigger picture perspective. As you said, have a plan. It's almost like strategic planning for your own career and having that be the forefront, never losing sight of that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's almost like insurance or preventative strategy, because everybody needs a disaster recovery plan. Everybody does.
It's definitely not something I think people would ever think of, a disaster recovery plan.
Well, it's running your career like a business, right? And if you're looking at your business, well, you know, what's the revenue, right? So that's your salary and your bonus, and what's your revenue continuity plan? Look at it that way.
Right. So to close, any last words of wisdom?
It goes back to being kind and generous. One thing that I like to think about with the scale of importance in your life, in your personal life, what's the most important? Well, it's your immediate family. It's potentially your spouse, your children, your parents, and then after that, it's your siblings, maybe, or your best friends, and all the way down to maybe that seventh cousin you've never spoken to. In your professional life, it's treating the people around you in that generous way. So think of everybody within your circle, clients, the people that you manage, potentially your peers, your managers, your boss's boss, but also your vendors and competitors. You never know who can be a mentor to you, who can potentially make that connection. I tell people all the time, take care of your employees. They may one day hire you. Be really kind to the people that work for you, because they ultimately make you look good in front of clients.
That's a great message. It's definitely not something I think most people would ever consider coming from somebody who's in the recruiting industry.
Well, I think we're all on the same team, and that's really the team to make something of our lives, to get to retirement. So sometimes I'll joke amongst my friends that we're all in the same early retirement team.
So, and finally, what's the best way listeners can connect with you?
They can connect with me on our website, fastbookadvisors.com. We're an agency in a bunch of different areas, but mainly digital. But we do financial services. Happy to connect. There's a contact us button right on the front page.
Great. Thanks so much for being on the show today, Dan.
Thanks so much for having me. This has been really great. And it's great always to chat with you. Thank you so much.
I want to thank Dan again for sharing his insights. So for hiring managers, it really comes down to finding the right fit based on business goals you're looking to address. And when talking to a recruiter, it's best to convey the problem you're looking to solve as opposed to the checklist of requirements describing the seat you're looking to fill. And if you do, they'll be better able to find that person who can solve those problems. But you have to be realistic. Finding top-notch executive talent can't be done on short notice, so it's best to map out a timeline. For job hunters, you have to think of your career as a business, which means creating a clear strategy for what you want your career path to be, then figure out the subsequent tactics that need to happen. And like a business, learn how to market yourself. Showcase your aptitude and impact so you close that cognitive gap between what they've read and what they can hear from you. Thanks for listening to the Strategic Momentum Podcast. You can learn more about Dan's approach to recruiting and connect with them at fastbookadvisors.com. If you like what you heard, please subscribe to the show on iTunes and leave us a review. This is what helps others find our podcast. You can also find us in the Google Play Store, Spotify, and Stitcher Radio. And if you want to hear previous episodes or get show notes from this episode, you can also visit us on our podcast page at flywheelassociates.com/podcast. I'm Connie Steele, and you've been listening to the Strategic Momentum Podcast.